Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze sits down with Euronews ahead of the country's parliamentary elections.
Beirut faced a night of intense explosions as some 17 Israeli airstrikes hit Lebanon's capital overnight. At least one person was killed and several injured in a strike on a residential building in the city's southern suburb of Dahiyeh. In southern Lebanon, 3 soldiers of the Lebanese army were killed in an Israeli strike on its troops. Since the end of September, a total of 13 Lebanese soldiers have been killed. The Lebanese army is not fighting the Israelis in their conflict with Hezbollah, but providing support services for the civilian population. Israel has also expanded its military campaign to the ancient city of Tyre after issuing evacuation orders. The evacuation area covered a densely populated stretch between 2 UNESCO World Heritage sites. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization postponed its last round of polio vaccinations in northern Gaza because of intense bombardment. Israel's ongoing siege of the area has displaced more than 60,000 Palestinians to central Gaza.
$1 billion in pledges were raised at the International Aid Conference for Lebanon held in Paris. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot announced the conference raised $800 million in humanitarian aid and $200 million in military support for the Lebanese army. President Emmanuel Macron said massive aid is needed to support the country and pledged France would provide a €100 million package.
Ce qu'il faut, c'est tout simplement abriter les familles, nourrir les enfants, soigner les blessés, continuer d'assurer la scolarité des élèves. Il faut trouver des solutions d'autant plus vite qu'il faut à tout prix éviter que le déplacement des gens du sud vers Beyrouth et d'autres régions du Liban ne crée de nouvelles divisions parmi les Libanais. La guerre doit cesser au plus vite. Il faut un cessez-le-feu au Liban.
The conference, which gathered over 17 nations, raised double of the original appeal of $426 million set by the United Nations. Italy this week announced new aid of €10 million, and Germany on Wednesday pledged an additional €60 million.
Brics leaders posed for a group photo ahead of the closing plenary session of the summit hosted by Vladimir Putin in the Russian city of Kazan. The 3-day conference was attended by 36 countries as well as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. It covered the deepening of financial cooperation, including the development of alternatives to Western-dominated payment systems, as well as settling regional conflicts and moving to expand the group's members. Speaking at Thursday's plenary session, Putin spoke of a shared vision of new democratic global order, while also blaming Western sanctions for undermining regional stability, including in Ukraine.
Один из примеров этого – это Украина, которую используют для создания критических угроз безопасности России, игнорируя при этом наши жизненные интересы, справедливые озабоченности ущемления прав русскоязычных людей. А сейчас и вообще не скрывают цель нанести нашей стране стратегическое поражение.
Putin also proposed to reform the UN, expanding the representation of the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Poland's President Andrzej Duda arrived at South Korea's presidential office on Thursday for a summit with President Yoon Suk-yeol. Their meeting takes place in a special context as North Korea has sent troops to Russia as it wages war in Ukraine. Polish and South Korean top security officials already met on Wednesday and agreed to expand their nation's defense cooperation in response. South Korea recently signed a deal to purchase so-called suicide drones from Poland to counter North Korea's rising threats.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo González, a candidate in July's presidential elections, have been awarded the European Parliament's annual Sakharov Prize for freedom of thought. The European Parliament has highlighted, quote, their courageous struggle to restore freedom and democracy in Venezuela.
It is my privilege to announce that the 2024 Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought has been awarded to Maria Corina Machado, leader of the Democratic Forces in Venezuela. Leader of the Democratic Forces in Venezuela and President-elect Edmundo González Urrutia, representing all Venezuelans.
The European Parliament recognized Edmundo González as the elected president of Venezuela in a non-binding resolution in September. The award will be presented on 18th December.
An investigation into the disappearance of more than 50,000 child migrants has won the European Parliament's 2024 Daphne Caruana Galizia Prize for Journalism. Lost in Europe, a project led by Dutch journalist Heesje van Haren, revealed that since 2021, on average nearly 47 migrant children arriving in Europe have gone missing per day. The research uncovered significant inconsistencies in documentation and reporting across 31 countries, including Austria, Germany and Italy, raising concerns that the actual number of missing children may be higher.
They say this is just a tip of the iceberg, that there were 51,433 children missing. The last time that we did this investigation, there were only 18,000 children missing back in 2021. So the number did increase. We don't know what happens if we do the investigation again in 3 years.
The investigation found that many of these children fall victim to human trafficking or get caught up in people smuggling gangs.
Many children are also caught at the borders, and they end up in prison for people smuggling whilst they were smuggled themselves. So the EU war against people smuggling works out the other way for minor children. A lot of minor children are in adult detention because of that.
The Lost in Europe team received their award at a ceremony in Strasbourg.
Armed security remained at the scene of the aerospace complex in Ankara that was attacked on Wednesday, killing 5 people and wounding more than 20 others. Turkey's interior minister and defense minister blamed the attack on Kurdish PKK militants, which Turkey and its Western allies consider a terrorist group. Following the attack, Turkey's air force struck Kurdish militant targets in Iraq and Syria in an apparent retaliation. The defense ministry said more than 30 targets were destroyed in the aerial offensive, without providing details on the locations that were hit. It said precautions were taken to prevent harm to civilians, although the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces say 12 civilians were killed. The attacks continued for a second day on Thursday. There was no immediate statement from the PKK on the attack in Ankara or the Kurdish airstrikes. Turkey's President Recep Erdogan condemned the attack during a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of a Brics meeting in Russia.
On the 26th of October, Georgia will hold parliamentary elections, marking a pivotal moment as the country's first under a fully proportional system. The stakes are high, with the outcome potentially shaping the nation's future integration within the EU and its movement away from Russian influence. In an interview with Euronews, Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze said the nation's orthodox values make it an ideal partner to Europe.
To be part of the European family is a kind of historic choice for Georgia and for Georgians. You know that we are a Christian nation. And Europe was always associated with Christianity and with defending and protecting Christianity for Georgia. So that's why Europe was always a kind of natural choice for Georgia and for Georgians.
Georgia was granted EU candidate status last year, but controversial legislation introduced by the government since then has put the country's accession talks at risk. Of particular concern is the Foreign Agents Bill, which critics say is based on a similar law in Russia aimed at stifling political dissent. But Georgia's Prime Minister says Russian influence is non-existent.
You can say that Russia is not influential in Georgia. There are no political parties where they would enjoy their influence. There is no influential media channels with their influence. So that's why the Russian side cannot influence the elections in Georgia, essentially.
The campaign environment heading into the elections has been heavily polarized, and with opinion polls continuing to produce contradictory results, Georgia's future remains unclear.
Aujourd'hui, on rend service aux gens qui sont privés d'une part de leur mobilité ou pour lesquels c'est très difficile de se déplacer.
On garantit tout ça par une technologie en fait qui est conforme à la vision européenne de ce que doit être un véhicule automatisé, à savoir un véhicule qui a appris son parcours avant de l'opérer et qui finalement, lorsqu'il est en opération et sans conducteur à bord, ne fait que comparer ce qu'il a appris avec ce qu'il voit.